So welcome everybody. I am just elated and thrilled to be in this conversation and fireside chat with Dr. Shawn Ginwright. I've been following Dr. Ginwright's work probably for maybe actually between 5 and 8 years, because I remember I got more into the work when you had published Hope and Healing in Urban Education. And that was just a really powerful text that really began to seriously invite us to think about healing in the context of educational practice and theory and policy. So brother, welcome to the inaugural Healing Centered Education Summit. You know, it's only divine timing that you're the first person we talked to, because you were the first person who I heard even talk about healing seriously in the context of education.
Yeah. Well, this is an important, well, first of all, congratulations on pulling together, this summit. I mean, it's deeply needed at this time. It is perhaps, I think, one of the most important and critical things we can be talking about in education right now. And I think that this summit and the ability to pull folks together to give folks ideas and strategies around healing is deeply important. So congratulations on pulling this together.
Yeah. And just want to thank the team, small team that put this beautiful event together. And tonight we'll be acknowledging them even more during our opening ceremony. So this fireside chat is an attempt just to kind of step into the waters of the healing and the restorative turn in education. So I know you're working. I think it's coming out. You're working on a book, The Four Pivots. So I just want to begin there. Yes.
It's not out yet. I just got the author copies just as a prototype of what the book is going to look like, but it's done, man.
That's beautiful, and I just want to affirm that you've been writing that for a minute, and I just can't wait to have my hands in it. We'll talk a little bit about karma in a moment, but I really want to land there. Like, tell us about the book. What are you exploring in it? What's the message?
Yeah, well, the book is really making the argument about the relationship between our own healing and transformation and the healing and transformation of our movements and our society. And it's based on my own sort of deep reflection and work, healing and trauma, working in communities for the past, 25, 30 years, as well as based in some research. It's research light, actually. And I wanted to keep it that way because I really wanted folks to do deeper reflection, and it's called the Four Pivots. And I'll talk about the pivots, the four pivots, but they're called pivots and not a shift, because a pivot is something that you do. It's a subtle change in direction. That subtle change in direction over time has you end up in a profoundly different place. And so a shift takes a lot of effort to move from one place to another, but a pivot is subtle. And so the four pivots, these shifts that I encourage people to make, while subtle, have a profound impact on the long-term deep change that we wish to seek. And so that's what the book is about.
Yeah, no, that's powerful. That's powerful. And I know that in the pivots, there are particular layers, individual, structural, interpersonal, in relationship to healing and trauma. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, the book is divided in sort of around four pivots, and I'll talk about the four pivots. So the first pivot that I write about, the first section of the book, is really about, first we have to understand the context that we live in, which is both trauma as well as transformation. We sit directly between trauma and transformation. And if we're not really deeply aware of the space
Mhm.
that we're in right now, we
Mhm.
as social justice professionals, as
Mhm.
educators, as social
Mhm.
workers,
Yeah.
for those who want to change society, we can actually, if we're not aware of that, we can reproduce the trauma
Mhm.
as
Yeah.
opposed to engaging in transformation. And so the four pivots are allow us to think more deeply about transformation as we heal from our personal and collective exposure to trauma. And so the
Yeah.
first pivot is a pivot that I encourage from lens to mirror. And
Mm.
a lens is, we've all been trained, particularly those of us who work in schools, particularly those of us who work in urban communities. We've been trained to have a lens on how we see and address, respond to social problems. It
Mhm.
means this, and lens is an outward analysis of the conditions and issues. It allows us to name, diagnose, understand racism, homophobia, sexism, poverty, all of the things that are necessary to name the conditions that cause suffering. But that's a lens. And
Mhm.
so I encourage people that that's one tool, but we also need a mirror.
Mm.
We know what a mirror does. A mirror is
Mhm.
about deep, honest reflection. A mirror don't lie when you put your face in front of it. A mirror
Mhm.
tells the truth. And so
Mm.
mirror work is the deeper reflection that we need to engage in to actually tell ourselves the truth about who we are, about our insecurities, our fears, our vulnerabilities, our hopes, our dreams. The mirror work sometimes is the toughest work that we do in justice work,
Mhm.
because sometimes we refuse to tell ourselves that we are tired. Sometimes we
Mhm.
refuse to tell ourselves that we're injured. Sometimes we refuse to tell ourselves that we're afraid and scared, and we move on. We continue to pretend like it's not there. And so mirror work
Mhm.
is deeper reflection. The second pivot is a pivot in our relationships, from transactional
Mm.
relationships to transformative relationships.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
we know that transactional relationships are just these sort of surface relationships that are a function of our title, right? And
Yeah.
those are efficient to really have, they're efficient relationships, but they're not transformative. They're not healing relationships.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
transformative relationships, I encourage for us to engage in vulnerability,
Mhm.
to engage in building, allowing us to be human with one another. And we
Mhm.
know that we have transformative relationships in our lives. Like when we've been through something tough and
Mhm.
somebody was there with you through it. Those are
Mm.
transformative relationships, because when people see you at the most human level, it allows for us to actually show up in more powerful ways for one another.
Yeah.
So I encourage us, and so in the book it talks about different ways that we can cultivate these kind of transformative relationships in our work in
Mhm.
schools, in our work in community-based organizations, and in work in our daily lives. Right? It just
Mhm.
matters.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
the third pivot is, and this is important. This is important, Angel. The pivot from problem to possibility.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
this pivot is important because, as a sociologist, how I was trained largely to see and address, diagnose social problems.
Mhm.
And we need to be able to understand the structural conditions and the ways
Mhm.
in which these structural institutional policies, practices, and procedures
Mhm.
create misery and suffering for Black and brown babies and families.
Yes.
Like, we need to address problems,
Mhm.
but
Yes.
only addressing problems doesn't give us the ability to create possibilities. Let me give you an
Mhm.
example. One of the things I
Yeah.
talk about in the book is that one of the greatest casualties of oppression
Mm.
is the destruction of our ability to dream beyond it.
Mhm.
And so as a result,
Mhm.
what we generally
Mhm.
do is we are connected to oppression by fighting it, resisting it, confronting it, right?
Mhm.
Deconstructing
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
But we always are in relationship to it, as
Mm.
opposed to creating something entirely different.
Mm.
And so, for example, I encourage people to think critically about And we need anti-racist stance. That is a complete necessary agentive position to take to confront white supremacy and racism in institutions. My question is anti-racism an end or a means? And if anti-racist stance is if it's a means, what is the end? Is it belonging? Is it transformation? So what I'm suggesting in this pivot from problem to possibility is that we decouple, give ourselves the permission to dream of the thing we want to create.
Yeah.
Because oppression tells us you don't deserve to dream. All you can do is fight me, resist me, confront me, damn it, right? That's what oppression says. You don't have the permission to imagine something other than oppression, right?
Yeah.
And this is why the lesson that comes from our ancestors, brother, right? This comes from our Africans who were deeply enslaved.
Yes.
They didn't want an easier form of slavery. They wanted freedom. They dreamed of freedom, even in the presence of that it was not possible to exist, right? And so this pivot from problem to possibility encourages us, right? It encourages us to begin to see the world and see the institution and see the practices that we imagine and dream about. This is also important, particularly for our young people, to cultivate possibility thinking, because oftentimes, and we know from research, that the ability to see a potential or possible future is one of the most healing processes that we can engage in, right? To cultivate the ability to see a possible future and move in that direction. So that's the third pivot. And the fourth and final pivot is a pivot from hustle to flow. A pivot from hustle to flow. Now, what is that? The pivot from hustle to flow means that we sometimes in our daily lives have an addiction to frenzy, even if we're not aware of it. That living in a capitalist white supremacist culture, capitalist culture defines a human being by what a human being can earn or produce. And it values it defines humanity by what a human being can earn or produce. And as a result of our ongoing diet with capitalist culture, we subscribe to that as well. So in some ways, our own lives are in a constant frenzy. And we believe that even in that frenzy, that we feel somewhat validated by our busyness. It tells us I matter, right? How many of you have a to-do list? Just raise your hand. I got one too, right? And what's the first thing you do when you cross something off your to-do list? You put 3 more things back on your to-do list, right? And so this is this ongoing sort of addiction to frenzy, and it's an addiction because it means that we believe that our constant doingness is actually beneficial to ourselves, our families, and our community. When in fact, we are actually not engaging in deep change when we're in frenzy. And so the pivot from hustle to flow, flow means that we're really critical and aware of how we decouple our addiction to frenzy. The first way that we engage in flow is to recognize that we're in frenzy. Find yourself, right? That's the first thing. The second thing, I don't talk about this a lot, but it's probably one of my favorite parts of the book, where in the section on flow, I talk about rest inequality. We know a lot about structural inequality, racial inequality, inequality in housing, but we also have significant amounts of rest inequality. And rest inequality is this notion that we do not deserve the capacity to rest. And a lot of research and research done by an amazing sister at Clark Atlanta University. At I can't remember the university right now because I'm just riffing, right? She's in Emory University. She's at Emory University. It's documented that that rest and equality, rest is not just slumber, but it's the quality of our rest. It's the playfulness of our rest. It's the peacefulness of our rest, right? That there's an inequality, there's an inequality in those of us who are without wealth, those of us who have multiple jobs because we're forced to work 3-4 jobs, those of us who have to split and work with our children in our homes, as well as work, as well as take care of our parents, that there's this sort of rest destruction that if we're not aware of, we slip in to hustle and we don't believe that we need to live in flow. And so flow means that we don't take frenzy for granted. It means that sometimes we're really busy. That's okay. Sometimes we're busy. But flow means we could say, okay, look at that. I'm hella busy right now and I'm feeling stressed. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm actually not going to go to that meeting. I'm actually going to walk to the park today. I'm actually not going to prepare dinner for the family because I actually need some space. It means whatever it means to you, it means that you take intentional action for your own flow. Now, this is not just self-care, y'all, right? And I'm critical of the term self-care. It's a very Western way of thinking about how we produce well-being. For folks of color, there is no distinction between self-care and collective care. When I'm well for my mama and daddy. I'm well for my family, my children, and the community that I serve. If I'm well, we're well. But you know what? If I'm sick, we sick, right? So there's no greater example of the distinction between well-being, collective well-being, and collective illness than the pandemic. We know. I mean, there's no evidence. There's just that's so evident that you can't believe that one person can be well in a sea of sickness. And so this notion to shift from hustle to flow also is a consciousness that when we claim our flow and well-being, right, and our rest, that it's in the book I said it's a middle finger to capitalist culture, right? Saying I deserve, right? I deserve to be well. I deserve to be well, and I'm gonna middle finger to capitalist culture that says I don't deserve it. And intentional decisions. Now, for those of us who run organizations and are in leadership roles, that means that we also have to think about the well-being of our workforce. And so I'm talking to teachers and teachers unions right now about building systems of support for teachers who are burnt out right now, who are stressed, who are hopeless right now, right? What kinds of systems of support do you have to build healing mechanisms for the teacher workforce? Those are the 4 pivots. I hope you sink your teeth into them. I got some radical ideas, but I hope that they're useful in your work for creating a healing-centered society.
No, brother, and they are timely. The ideas are timely. So much was coming up for me as you were talking. I just feel so blessed that I was able to marinate in your ideas during my doctorate program. So as you were talking, I could just sense into how much your thinking has evolved. And as we were talking, I was thinking about when I remember when you first framed, you were at Teachers College giving a talk at UMI, and I think the book had just come out, and you had framed having a pathogenic perspective or approach to kind of viewing problems, focusing on the pathology, the problems, and then a salutogenic approach, really centering the solutions to the problem. That kind of blew my mind. So that came up for me as you were talking. Some pieces around your previous books, Radical Healing, and also Hope and Healing in Urban Education. When you talk about being healing centered has a political dimension to it. And that cultivating hope is a political act. So I just wanted to surface some of those really powerful insights that came out of your recent and previous publications as you were talking, and just kind of really sensing into this beautiful trajectory of your scholarship and how you've landed there with that last pivot around rest and the inequality of rest. And I would even add there's an inequality of leisure.
Yes.
As a byproduct of the wealth gap. I mean, who has leisure, and who's allowed to have leisure, and how does that relate to rest, and how does that relate to our political economy? So just to say that I affirm everything you said, brother, and so just reminding people of the pivots, from lens to mirror, from transactional to transformational, from hustle to flow. Just really, 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 really powerful there. Let me invite you to think about the edge of your work. Like, what do you feel like is a growing edge for you? Where have you not gone in terms of healing-centered engagement? Where have you not gone in terms of healing-centered work? And where do you feel like there's your learning edge in terms of a practitioner, a scholar, a theoretician?
Well, I think the trajectory of my work, even as early as, when I was in graduate school, writing about Black youth in the first book, which is really an outgrowth of my dissertation, which is called Black in School. I'm always interested in the agentive well-being and the assets of Black young people and their families and communities, and very critical about the ways in which those assets harm Black youth and their families. And so that theme began in my dissertation work in Black in School, and then Black Youth Rising. I kind of was out of the closet a little bit about, hey, I think Black youth we should talk about the notion of agency. And I began to talk about the role of healing, simply because my work here in Oakland, I was seeing young people with the kinds of traumatic and trauma exposure that was not necessarily being talked about in my graduate school. Like I never even learned about trauma in graduate school, right? I didn't even learn about it. It wasn't part, and healing was not part of it. It was critical pedagogy, multiculturalism, critical race theory, Afrocentric education. All of those are really, important sort of ways to think about the supports that young people of color need. But man, I was seeing young people come in with fear and just exposure to stress. And so in my own work, what we were doing with young people is giving them the space to heal, right? We didn't call it healing at the time. I remember being at these trainings here in the San Francisco Bay Area on youth development, right? It was youth development. Yeah. And we were working with Black youth, their families, and youth development was sort of the new framework to think about how to support the positive supports and opportunities for youth. And it was great. And we were working with them, and I was just, I remember me and my staff getting the training. They were like, yeah, but what about Black youth who feel a lot of shame because they got dark skin? What about Black youth who they call themselves the N-word because they are kinky hair? And they have shame because their mama may be on crack. How does youth development speak to that? And it was a very flat, right? Because they weren't able, the youth development framework wasn't able to speak to the unique experiences of Black and brown babies and the things that they dealt with. And so that experience sort of pushed me to theorize about what we now call social justice youth development, right? And the roles that the context plays in the development and support of young people of color, and how we have to think about the role of agency. And then, of course, the next book was a series of work and paper was around healing, because I was really tired, Angel. I was really tired, man, at a point in my career of both reading and writing about Black misery and pathology. I was tired, man. I mean, I was tired of it. Yeah, I remember I even stopped watching The Wire. I stopped watching The Wire. I just stopped. I mean, it was a great series. But I started watching The Wire, and this is all happening at the same time. I'm like, you know what? I want to write about Black possibility. I want to write about the future of Black beauty, because I see, even in the fact, and so in this article that y'all may have read called "Shifting from Trauma Informed: The Future of Healing," right? The young man named Marcus. I had like 50 or 60 examples of that, right? Where young people were like, yeah, this thing happened to me, man, but let me tell you about this t-shirt company. I wish I still have a t-shirt that this homeless young boy, this young man, he was like, he may have been 16 or 17 years old, in the trauma group that I was facilitating. I should like hang this shirt up in my office, but he wanted to create his own shirt company. He was homeless, right? He didn't have a place to live. He came and lived with me for a while. I gave him like $100. He took that $100. He bought some t-shirts and he printed these t-shirts, and he was out on the block selling them, right? So all these examples about the future possibility. And so I wanted to stop writing about the misery. We know about that and the conditions that could create it. And I wanted to talk about these examples of healing. So when he created this shirt company, he was healing himself, despite the fact that he had sexual and violent abuse, despite the fact that he'd spent time in prison. All of that stuff happened, but he still could see himself in the future. I'm just riffing here, man. And so so this book that's just coming out, I wanted to talk more precisely about healing. And I was talking to my friend. This is in the introduction, so y'all read about this. But I got this black kitchen. I got a black table in my kitchen, right? And we every night my friends come over. We drink wine and talk shit and talk what we're doing. And this is informal because I'm cussing and
it's all good. Fireside chat.
But it's true. It's true. We come over my house and we be drinking wine and we talk, and I'm like, hey man, I'm thinking about writing another book. And my wife and partner, she said, okay, what are you writing about? I'm like, oh, write about healing and teaching and pedagogy and the suffering of trauma. And her friend was like, damn, you gonna write about that again? And my boy was like, man, you need to write something way bigger. Right? Way bigger than that. Like folks, everybody can deal with needs healing. I was like, oh. And so I was like, and then they started talking about a bigger vision, right? And so I came back the next week. I'm like, hey, what would it look like if I wrote a book about creating a healing-centered society? Like a society that's centered on healing, all the institutions. And so they was like, yeah, that's it. Write that one. Now pour me some more wine.
Pour it up.
So that's kind of the genesis of this book. And so the cutting edge, back to your brilliant question, Angel, the edge is like, how do we create a healing-centered society? We know where we are right now. We are deeply engaged in a fractured republic where the right and the left we are actually engaged in a civil war right now, right? And it's an ideological war. It's already started. And so if we don't have the tools to weave our fractured republic back together, it's going to require different tools. And the answer, in my view, to borrow a phrase from Van Jones, the answer isn't a right conservative answer nor a left progressive answer. Left and right gets us in the same place. The answer is up. That's the direction. It's not left or right, it's up. And I believe that we have to evolve as a species or repeat. Evolve or repeat. And left and right got us to where we are, but up will allow us to get us to the next space. And so my hope, in response to your question, is the edge, is that this book forces us to go up as a people, to really begin to have the tools to not go left or right, but up.
No, so much, brother. I'm getting chills. So much. I'll just respond immediately, and then we'll transition into Q&A in a moment. But Because part of I've been trying to kind of really document the healing and restorative turn um, on so many different levels, right? For me, most immediately, as a young scholar of color, it was you. I just kind of held on to you. Okay, healing centered engagement, and then I just really appreciated how in that text, Hope and Healing, you talked about the healing zone that one of your students created in San Francisco, and and understanding social toxicity, and just thank you for not giving up and for producing that scholarship. And then I kind of started to dig more and looking at like restorative justice and social emotional learning and mindfulness and trauma informed pedagogy and culturally responsive pedagogy and multicultural education. All of those forms of pedagogical approaches are, I view, from part of the healing centered turn. And in particular, in the some of the research that I did in my dissertation, I kind of looked at healing centered pedagogies in response to imperial and colonial rule within the context of indigenous communities as evidence of the healing centered turn. But as part of that, two things just to mention for folks who are in the summit and just get a rich understanding of this kind of paradigm. One is like, you have the cultural revolution in the 70s, and then you also have the what that did or didn't do, the general culture. You had a lot of folks who came back from the East and influencing mindfulness movements, and then the self-help industry. The self-help industry is also part of the restorative turn. And it's just kind of another, because you just said this, you did something for me just now that I've been trying to find language for. So in predominantly white spiritual spaces, there's all this talk about evolving, evolutionary leaps, quantum leaps. But oftentimes when they talk about it, it's so divorced. The leap is too big. And I think the framing of going up and the ways in which you just described your learning edge is a more accessible way of talking about the social and evolutionary leap that we have to engage in terms of our consciousness as a species on a planetary level right now. So just thank you for that really grounding of framing, because I hear it in different spaces, but it just falls flat. It just falls flat. So thank you for that. And so much
Angel,
more.
This is built off of our ancestors, right? Who were future thinkers and doers and beers and spiritual. This is from our African ancestors, our indigenous ancestors, our Maori ancestors, right? And so there is a way that indigeneity has the answers.
Right?
They're there. As I see that Maestro Jerry Teo will be participating, and he taught me that la cultura cura, right? The culture cures, and so when we embrace and study our cultural roots, there are answers to these complex existential questions. The problem of education is not a technical and strategic question, man. It's just not. The challenges of education is a spiritual one. It is. I'm just going to say it publicly, right? There's enough resources. We can solve that problem. It is not a problem of technical policies and strategies only. The policies and strategies are a function of deeper values of who we are as a people. So we can create policies and strategies and continue to do that. I'm not suggesting we should stop doing that. We need to have resources and policies, but we also need to have the values of what it means to be human, right? And those values then emanate to more powerful, transformative kinds of policy.
Yeah. Thank you so much, brother. Always appreciate being in dialogue with you. I want to transition to bringing the audience in, and some really powerful questions have come in already. And so I want to kind of spoil the community and provide an opportunity to engage you directly. I know that Sister Maren Kelly had put a question in the chat that I thought was really powerful. No pressure on you, Maren. I could ask Dr. Ginwright your question, but if you want to bring your voice in you could ask the question directly yourself. How do you feel?
Absolutely, I can. Thank you so much for allowing me to do so. Thank you, Shawn, for your words. Look forward to your book. My question is, are there any spiritual teachers that have influenced your work? What comes to mind for me is Howard Thurman's notion about if we lose our freedom as losing our sense of options, our souls die. And it seems so relevant to your work. The notion that we really need to keep our faith in alternatives to the injustices that we face in our society. And so I was just really wondering any spiritual teachers that have influenced you and if Howard Thurman is one of them.
Absolutely. It's amazing that you picked that up right off. I got really, as I said before, dissatisfied with a lot of, and I shouldn't say this because I know some of you are graduate students, but it's the truth. I got a little weary and tired of reading educational research and sociological research. I just did. And so I took a year and stopped reading it, right? And I believe that there were deeper questions and deeper answers to those questions that didn't appear in some of the sociological and educational researches I was reading. So I turned back to my first love of literature, which was James Baldwin, who provides a way of understanding and writing about Black life that heals me when I read it. And the second was, of course, Howard Thurman, beginning with Jesus and the Disinherited, and then also Grace Lee Boggs, who really is trying to understand deep questions about justice and change. And so those three, and there are others as well, but those three certainly provided the kind of spiritual and intellectual grounding, for me to really, wrestle with those questions. So thanks for that. Is it Marion? Thanks for the question, Marion.
Yes, thank you so much for answering. I appreciate that very much.
Thank you so much. And I want to claim and acknowledge that both both Grace and Thurman for me are dear, but Thurman for me comes up a lot. And we could go deep into Thurman because Thurman was a mentor of King and deep supportive in terms of nonviolent communication, and so rich how we're tied with and in some deep lineage. So folks, Fireside Chat, Dr. Ginwright and I just chilling here, posting up, just here with you all. I mean, the part of the healing centered turn is that it's accessible. We try to be as humble as possible. So all the scholars you'll see across the summit are just down to earth. So let's connect. Sister Ronisha.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon. Hey, Dr. Ginwright. I was thinking about the idea of post-humanism. I've been hearing this come up often lately, and what it sounded like to me was that society needs to give up on human capacity to solve any of our problems and look to everything to be based on artificial intelligence. And I kept thinking to myself, we haven't even scratched the surface to unlock what our ancestors have been telling us to do for all this time. We keep bypassing it as if it doesn't matter. And so everything you just said really resonated in the moment. I want to see what your thoughts are. Have you thought anything about the post-humanism turn or that urge for people to go that route, as if to say that there's nothing else that humans can do?
I'm not familiar with that term. I'd love to explore that, but I do want to respond to your question. Even before we even that question, even the term post-humanism seems to presume that we've actually reached the level of being fully human, which we have not.
Right.
So let's start with that. We can't talk about a post-humanism until we actually can reach our full humanity, which we have not yet have accomplished. And so, so how do we know? I think the question is, how do we know that we're reaching or even striving to be more fully human? And that question to me is simply when we have greater sense of, I saw someone on the chat use the term Ubuntu, right? When Ubuntu becomes a common way of being for all humans, again, I'm gonna go back to this pandemic. We recognize that the well-being of that child in Nigeria and that grandmother in Saudi Arabia and that steel worker in Pittsburgh has an impact on my health, right? The interconnectedness is so fragile, right? And so I think that when we begin to embrace and live out the sort of spirit of Ubuntu, I am because we are. I am, when we see each other, that is when we actually are beginning to strive for our full humanity. And again, these are not sort of, the term post-humanism seems to be a very Western way of thinking about a linear way that we be, like we're pre-human, then human and post-human, right? Like that these terms sometimes, one of the things, Ranisha, and I'm gonna just shut up because I know y'all got a lot of questions, but you want me to talk, and I like to talk. So, one of the things is that the values of, when we interrogate terms, there's implicit values in those terms that, meaning that's enshrined in these words that we use, right? And so the term post, the term humanism, there's a lot of material underneath that. And so I don't even know if I'm answering your question, Ranisha, but I believe that as educators, our goal is actually not to teach, right? I think our first goal is to be fully human, and that teaching then naturally comes from that. And it's hard to be fully human in institutions that don't see you or want you to be fully human. And so, but I still believe that even in that, we still have to strive for that. And this space that is being created right now, I think is an important step in creating that.
If I may, just to support this inquiry around post-humanism, there's a difference in the field between post-humanism and transhumanism. So you'll see in the coming years, there's going to be a whole bunch of humanisms. Transhumanism deals with this idea of escaping the human through technological innovation and upgrading through all kinds of things. Post-humanism as a philosophical movement, check out Lisa Bredotti, the Italian woman and powerful philosopher. Fundamentally, post-humanism is about questioning the ways in which we've defined the human anchored in white, male, property-owning, rationally thinking man. And that the post incorporates a more, not just diverse, but plural understanding of what it means to be human. So just a little distinction there to support what post-humanism might mean in some philosophical circles, but some very rich discussion. Laura?
Hi, Angel. Thank you so much. Thank you, Professor, so much for this amazing fireside chat. I was curious I'm wondering about examples or spaces or places where you have seen these four pivots in action, or spaces where you have felt authentically inspired and felt like it's the lived embodiment of these four pivots, and that's really getting us closer to creating a healer-centered society, whether that's in university, out of school spaces, family, anything that's inspired you. I'd love to hear what that looks like.
Oh, you gotta buy the book, sister. No, no. And the book has a lot of examples, but I think one quick example is I was asked to come into a neighborhood in a city in the Midwest. It was primarily African American neighborhood. Where there were 14 Blacks, nonprofit organizations serving Black youth in this one neighborhood, and they were battling each other for years. They didn't trust each other. They battled each other over funding. They badmouthed each other in public. They competed against scarce resources. They didn't trust each other. And so they asked me to come in and say, hey, can you do some healing here? And I'm like, this is deep. This is this stuff. In fact, the first meeting we went to, they basically cussed me out. It was like, who the hell are you? Get your ass out of here. Right. I mean, the very first meeting, I'm being real, y'all. And so we stuck with it, and we brought those folks together because they recognized that there's something fundamentally wrong about these organizations not being able to work together. And we used a process around healing that we recognize that the first step of healing is identifying something my mama said years ago when I wrote the book, Hope and Healing. She said, baby, what are people healing from? And I was like, damn, that's a good question, mama. And so the first part of healing is understanding how you were harmed. And so we went into this neighborhood and we recognized that these organizations were fighting each other and distrusted each other because of the funding mechanism. Funding would come in and they would basically sprinkle some money in the neighborhood and watch people fight over it. That happened for years. So let's talk about that. How did that hurt you? Well, when you got that money, that means I had to fire somebody and I don't trust you, right? And so we had hard conversations with these community leaders, man. And it was tough. It was tears and fighting, but we stuck together, right? And we went through these 4 pivots, so much so now people say things like, in this community meeting, they say, is that possibility thinking, Cindy? Was that problem thinking? Or is that possibility thinking? What we need to do is possibility thinking. Okay, let's all do some mirror work now, y'all. Let's all do some mirror work. We know the problem. Let's do some mirror work. Let's all reflect on our role in this. They're using the pivots, right, in their conversation and discussions. They're actually, so that community now is working together to actually advocate that the city fund, that the tax dollars from the city actually fund their organization. So they don't have to compete no more. Yeah. So they're working together to create that. So, and it's not done yet. It's not like a solved problem. It's in progress. So I talk about this example and some other examples like that in the book, Laura.
Yeah.
See, I just gave you the whole chapter 4. That means you.
I know, right? I know. I wanna respect time. So I know a lot of you want to have questions. So here's what we'll do. I want each person who has their hand up to at least ask their question. So we're going to do this thing called question stacking. Question stacking. After each question, I'm sure each will be so juicy. There will be this urge and this desire to respond to it, Dr. G. So let's just hold all of them together. So we'll have Nelson, Medina, Quinn, Sharice, and Rashida. Just say your question. A quick hopscotch question, and then let the next person share. And at the end, we'll hold all of them and see what makes sense in terms of responding to. Let's go with Nelson.
Yeah, it was more just a comment, just to put into perspective, like how much this means. So thank you, Angel. Thank you, Shawn. I'm 21. I'm been experiencing like extreme burnout, being first gen, low income, taking a break from Columbia, led a nonprofit in high school. That just led to like physical fatigue, like a lot of mental health issues, excuse me. So just hearing this, being this young, being a part of this space and seeing like stuff that I've been advocating, surviving so much types of trauma and going through so much in life, like having a space that's like literally vocalizing this, people writing books about this. This is, new to me, but something I know we all hold inside of us. So it just means a lot. And I just want to thank y'all.
Yeah, thank you so much, brother. And please reach out to me and stay connected. We'd love to nurture you more. Medina?
So I have a question, but my questions are never like just straightforward, right? Like it's always like a little deeper. But I want to speak about this concept of reconciling, right? And so I guess the form of it is like how do I reconcile some huge tensions that exist right now currently in schooling structures? And one of them being that utilizing these concepts and these frameworks around healing centeredness that are very much about band-aids that schooling systems are trying to do. Okay, so I guess being more specific to that is a tension that really lies with is that I see systems using some of these frameworks right? And using them to some extent through co-opting, using them to the extent of appropriating, even using concepts around indigeneity, and using them, right, as this marketized approach to reform, educational reform. So, you know, the concept of reconciling is, and I'm trying to be quick with this, right? The issue with reconciling is this realizing that these systems are what we have currently, that our youth are in, right? That our adults are in. And so it's this matter of selecting where I want the battle to be. And so, anyways, I like I said, trying to formulate that quicker, but really talking about. So here's the direct question: where is the battle in relation to these marketized programs that come through our school that utilize healing-centered engagement, utilize concepts such as, I'll put it there. So is that a battle worth fighting in your perspective, Dr. Ginwright?
Rich. So let's create some space around that robust question, just for a moment. Very rich, brother. And just to hold the tension of wanting to respond. Quinn, talk to me. What's your question?
Hey, everybody. Really quickly, just this concept of healing-centered education as we talk with other educators about it. I see two major elements or two major aspects. One being holding space or space holding, and then the other one being something that I would view as more deeper healing work, shadow work, deeper connection work, leaning into discomfort, that side. So I see it as like, the way I view it is like there's holding space, which is, a really deep process of community building and creating the space for deeper things to happen. And then there's the other side, which is like, we're going to actually look at what our shadows are. We're going to do some serious, I love the word mirror, mirror work. Within educational context, as I'm working with teachers in schools, is it, should I just be focusing on the holding space part? Or should I also be, is it okay to invite teachers to lean into deeper healing work within that container? And that's the question that I'm sitting at these days.
Yeah, so just create some space around another brilliant contribution. Charisse?
Yes, greetings. Thank you so much. I'm so excited about this conference. I want to step back a little bit as you talked about humanism, that there's this more fundamental issue that we are really dealing with. And I think this meets head on in the classroom as what is the difference in spirituality and religion, especially as our culture so interweaves them. I believe mindfulness has some touch in here as we're working on that type of consciousness, but I would just like to hear your thoughts. One of my mentors, Daisaku Ikeda from the Soka Gakkai, often mentions that is the core source of education, is to teach humanity.
Thank you for that. Rashida?
Yes, peace and blessings. Thank you so much, Dr. Angel and Dr. Ginwright. So yes, my name is Rashida Brown Harris. I'm a parent leader. I'm not an official professional mental health provider or certified educator. And so when we speak about lens to mirror, as I engage with school leaders and counselors, and I support the discussions around looking at ourselves, our experiences, our emotions, our wants and needs, centering ourselves in humanity, they take offense and they're appalled because they look at me as this non-certified, uneducated, big mouth
Mhm.
parent trying to tell them how to do their job. And I'm just looking for guidance, like a peaceful, respectful, welcoming way to get their attention and buy in to the Healing Center School's work collaboratively, like a true school community. And so just really trying to process what that would look like in certain spaces dealing with school leaders and counselors. So
Yeah, and just to acknowledge Sister Rashida as part of the New York City Healing Centered Schools Working Group, very powerful group that has emerged in the Mighty Networks. We'll post some of their work. I just want to say that question stacking really allows for the brilliance of the community to show up. And in a way, sometimes the very questions are answers. So brother, I know we want to respect your time. In response to those questions in your book, and you can really meet your need in terms of needing to transition. What comes up for you?
Oh, a lot. There's a lot of great questions. I wish we had some more time. I'm not really able to answer all of the very deep questions. And I think the one thing I want to do is I do want to encourage folks to explore I just put it in the chat, the Healing Centered Engagement Certification. Part of this is we do need to be able to control our own destiny. And when folks co-opt to say, we're doing healing centered schools and healing centered, it needs to be rooted in both the theory and the practice that came from our ancestors, right? And so it's important that when we say we're healing centered practitioners, that we have some grounding in that. So the certification is in the chat. I would just say that the most powerful thing we can do is what we're doing now, is coming together with questions, and there's no one right answer for any of this. And as long as we have the vision, as long as we have the intentionality, and as long as we have the community around us to create the thing we want to see, which is healing and transformation of our young people in our schools, we'll find the answer. I wish I had opportunity to speak directly with Rashida and on all the questions and Quinn, but we don't have the time right now. But I do want to be able to provide some resources for you. So Angel, I will be having Deb Kersey from our Flourish Agenda team provide you with a healing centered engagement kind of implementation toolkit for folks that are interested in actually taking some of these ideas and having them land in whatever setting that you see fit. It's just an introductory toolkit, but it gives you a sense of what it might look like in a school setting, in a nonprofit setting. And so I'll have her circle around and send that to you. Angel.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. And when you send that over, I'll take it and I'll put it across all the digital platforms that we have access to in terms of the summit. Look, folks, even though we don't have enough time to go deeper into all of those questions, let's take the sense of disappointment that can come from not having enough time and frame it as a desire for more nourishing and being in community. So, this is the beginning of the summit. Tonight we'll have our formal opening ceremony. It is a pleasure to open at least the summit where, informally with a fireside chat with Dr. Shawn Ginwright. And brother, I appreciate you so much. And we look forward to being in community with you in the future. And everybody, pull up tonight to the opening ceremony and to the networking session where we'll be able to have these conversations in more small communities. With that being said, let's all, just give some love to Dr. Ginwright, praise up his book, buy it in advance. Brother, you take good care.
Take care.
Yeah.